Hi, I'm Dan Schmitt. I do a weekly television show called Team Chicago Challenge. My website is teamchicago.tv, teamchicago.tv. We're in Kenosha. We're at my good friend Ken Rothman garage, and we're going to talk about a little bit about this Brough-Superior Motorcycle. I'm going to talk to some of the guys here, some of my old friends, T.C. Christenson, John Swartz, Norm Gruber. I'm going to show little highlights of all that. We're just going to have a good time right here, Sunday morning in Kenosha. And don't forget my website, teamchicago.tv. As we see this photo of John Swartz at Sycamore Speedway, 1971, John is racing the Gold Star, number 85. That's me racing the Triumph, number 35. And let's go talk to my good friend, John Swartz.
My name, Dan, is John Swartz. I was born in Beatrice, Nebraska. My parents came to Chicago because of the money in this area, and we ended up in Zion, Illinois.
BSA, you were a BSA dealer first, then you became a Yamaha dealer. So tell us, how did you become a BSA dealer?
54, I started racing motorcycles. A friend of mine took me to Peoria on a KHK, and I raced Peoria racetrack in 1954. I got into racing. Another friend of mine, Ray K, sold me his WR for $150, by the way, and that put me into professional racing for $150. I started racing WR in the half-mile tracks at all the fairgrounds, Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin. So I was a WR racer, and had a family, wife, children. My wife was my greatest fan, and that's how I got into motorcycle racing, I guess. And run Harley Davidson, and then Al Mingle, the BSA dealer in Kenosha, Al Mingle loaned me a matchless G80 CS single-cylinder scrambler. I took it to Rockford. I was riding Harley at the time, but I took this matchless to Rockford and came third in the feature. It was short on power, but it handled the turns unbelievably well. So then I wanted to buy a matchless. I came back to Kenosha, told Al I want to buy a brand new matchless. Al said, no, I won't sell you a matchless. I'll sell you a Gold Star instead. I didn't want the Gold Star, I wanted the matchless. So I bought the Gold Star because Al wouldn't sell me a matchless. And I bought the Gold Star. And then in 59 on, I was BSA. And then I went to amateur racing after professional. Several reasons. You had 3 or 4 amateur races every week throughout the summer in this area. And you could race all the time. And the Gold Star, I could win all the time also on the Gold Star because it's amateur, and I had professional training, so I'd rather run amateur. So I just run a BSA Gold Star, and I began to be a BSA fan. From there, I couldn't get parts. I'd have breakdown parts. I could never buy parts for the BSA, and we approached BSA industry for a dealership, so I could have parts for my racing bike. And that's how kind of like I got started in the racing. Prior to that, I worked for Al Mingle for a year to get my training, to learn how to be a BSA dealer, the guy I bought the BSA from, and since 1962, I picked up the BSA franchise.
So what did it cost back then to become a dealer? What was the deal to become a dealer?
To be a dealer, I needed $1,500. My mother signed a note for me for $1,500, and I had to have 3 BSA motorcycles to start my dealership. And if I remember right, I bought a 500, maybe a Popper, and possibly a Spitfire in '62. Spitfire back then was still the 810 engine.
Was that easy were they easy to sell then? I mean, did you sell them right away, or?
I sold out of a garage. The bikes were beautiful, and people bought them.
So you ordered more. Shop. So you did pretty well as a BSA dealer.
Well, as a BSA dealer, we did very well.
Right.
Very well.
And when did you open the store in Zion?
Well, I worked out of my garage in '62, and the zoning board got on my back, wanted to take me to court and this and that. We kept the business going up until '64 when I bought a business building in Zion.
Which is the location that
I had up until the time I sold the business.
Wasn't that a house on wasn't that out of the bottom of a house?
Nice apartment on top.
Right.
Real nice commercial zone property that I sold the motorcycles out of, and lived in the house above. We had all oak floors. It was a beautiful, beautiful apartment upstairs. We did very well with BSA.
All right, then how did Yamaha approach you?
Well, prior to Yamaha, in 1966, I obtained a Honda franchise in 1966. That cost $10,000. That's just the cost of buying the bikes, by the way. You understand? Mm-hmm. I got $10,000 worth of bikes and parts in 1966. So I gave Honda a down payment of $3,000 to start a Honda franchise in '66. Honda told me, they came in my shop and they said I'd have to do this, do that. And they kind of dictated how I had to run my business. Plus in '66, BSAs were selling very well. And I told Honda to take a walk, which, by the way, was a multi-million-dollar mistake, as I see now. '71, we got word BSA is going down the toilet. So we transferred to the Triumph franchise. Then we approached Yamaha on the Yamaha dealership. Prior to that, though, Yamaha approached us. So I called up a guy by the name of Mr. Barson, and I ended up with the Yamaha franchise. The problem with the Japanese bikes, my repair department went down to nothing because we had nothing to repair unless the guy hit something or broke something, and we had to go into racing to keep the business in my repair shop going. So we went in heavy duty into racing with the Yamahas. Yamaha didn't do well racing in the beginning. Picked up Mako so we could win some races. When Yamaha came out with the YZ, we scrapped Mako, kept the Yamaha, and did very well with the Yamaha. And that's how Yamaha came about.
Right, right. So, so when did you finally give up being a dealer?
In 1983, my wife and I discussed about selling the business because the primary reason we wanted to sell the business, we were in business for over 20 years and had no bad experiences with my customers or the motorcycles. In '86, Frank Blazevich from Waukegan bought my business because he wanted my debt. I was a corporation, I had a nice debt, and he wanted my debt because he sold his Cadillac agency and he needed a write-off. So he bought my Yamaha business in '86.
And then you retired, basically, or?
I never retired. My wife and I decided in our 30s we were never going to retire. We'll work to the day we die, and now my wife is ill with Alzheimer's, so we're struggling, but we're doing very well. People provide for us. I have no retirement except Social Security, so thank the Lord for that. And I take care of my wife. She's at home with me, and that's why I take care of her. So we have a refrigerator full of food. We're being provided for. Don't ask for anything, it just comes my way. And then one thing I want to say in all of this is that my wife being sick and everything is very difficult for us and it's very stressful. The motorcycle people are true blue, faithful friends. They accept me the way I am, they accept my wife the way she is, and we're included with all the motorcycle activity to this day. Even like up at Ken Rotman's collection of motorcycles. Very good lifestyle. I'm content. I lived a great life. I'm over the hill now, but I lived a great life. Never went any other way. Met guys like you, Dan, and your friends, and the racetrack scene, beautiful. Very content. I can go to my grave saying, wow. I had my new Porsches. My wife was riding Mercedes-Benz, and now we're driving used Mercedes-Benz, but still, we're eating good every day, and the Lord provides. Great life. We never went no other way.
Thank you, John. And now we look at this picture of Norton Gruber when he lived on Foster Avenue right next to St. Cornelius Church. That is approximately 8 blocks from where I live right now. This is an Ariel Red Hunter 500cc motorcycle. And now we're going to talk to my good friend, Norm Gruber.
My name is Norm Gruber, and we've been racing amateur since 1976. Our big deal always was ice racing out at Mineola Hotel, and got got from there, we kind of graduated. Me and my two sons, Mark and Eric, we graduated into the flat track racing. And I never went pro, but the two boys did. And the two boys wound up AMA pro experts and did fairly well for themselves. But it just got so expensive, we just couldn't. We had to have an XR 750 Harley to be competitive, and it was just the expense was just too much for us. But we had a lot of fun, and that's when I got hooked up with Dan Schmitt and all the other guys, and made so many good friends over the years that we really had a great time. And right now, well, like I said, my two sons both went on to be AMA experts, and I never did. I just stayed amateur. I went in AMA novice 1 year because I had my Rotax ice racer, and I set it up because they started racing at Springfield again, and I could run my Rotax there. So I rode one race at Springfield, scared the hell out of myself, and it was just a great experience.
So tell me about these pictures. Were they?
Okay, these pictures. I met a guy at Springfield. His name is Alvin Wilcox. He's from Pekin, Illinois. He's an amateur artist. Anyhow, I told him, but I always wanted a picture of my two sons and I on the racetrack together, but it would never happen because we never raced together. And so Alvin said, well, you have 3 individual pictures, he says, I can crop it together. So I said, well, yeah. So I gave him the 3, and he cropped it, and it came out beautiful. In fact, he went ahead and did an 18 by 24 oil painting of this thing, and I got to take a picture of that and give it to Ken to hang on the wall here. But anyhow, the thing.
So tell me about these pictures.
Well, these
the top one, where's that from?
Well, the
number
top,
7P is Mark.
7P is Mark, and that particular picture was the Daytona short track. This 37P, this was my son Eric, who is now a development engineer for Harley Davidson. He's been with Harley now for about 12, 13 years. And me, of course, I never did go pro.
So where was this from?
This one is Daytona too, the Daytona short track, but that was amateur racing.
Right, running amateur stuff.
Yeah.
So flat tracking's been good to you, huh?
Oh yeah, no, we've made a lot of wonderful friends and just met a lot of great people, and it's been a great experience. Wouldn't trade it for anything.
Thank you, Norm. And now a clip of T.C. Christenson taking his twin-engine Norton down a runway for the British bike owners, his friends from Wisconsin.
T.C. Christenson, better known as the Hogslayer. We got the Norton racing machine that we built back in the 70s, actually, set all the world records with. And we're still in the motorcycle business. We got the Norton shop down in Kenosha here yet, and we're still building Nortons, and we're still racing bikes, and we're still in the game.
So tell me what you developed. What was the trick to get this bike as fast as it was? There was stuff that you guys developed first.
The biggest thing that we did on that motorcycle that made it unbeatable was basically we designed and developed the slipper clutches, and we had the 2-speed automatic transmission we built out of a Rambler overdrive unit. Went to a junkyard, got a Rambler overdrive, took the guts out, made our own cases up, and developed the 2-speed. And our first bike ever fuel injected. That was injector systems off an Offenhauser 104 that we developed for that bike, and the Hillborn actually helped us set that thing all up. And one of the first bikes that went to the big tires in that, we had the 6-inch slicks, and we had the one of the first bikes we built our own frames in that with all chromoly stuff, lightweight frames. And a combination of all that, they made it a record-setting bike. And all that stuff was actually built in Kenosha by all of my friends helped me build that bike. and put it all together. And once we got that thing really running and shit, ended up going off to the World Finals in the NHRA California for the World Finals, Super Nationals at the time. And that bike, when we showed up with that bike, they all said, "What the hell's a Norton? Who's TC Christian? Where the hell is Kenosha, Wisconsin?" So they didn't know nothing about our game. When we showed up with that thing, we qualified number 2. And when the final rounds came, we made 3 world record runs in a row, and 859, 850s, and then the world record at the time, we set it down at 852, 170 miles an hour. And that was a record we set. And up to that time, we already had the 180 mile an hour world record for the speed. So at Ontario, we set the ET record, and a year or two ago before that, we set the speed record. In fact, that was at US 30 drag strip. We did a big drag race there. We ran that bike, and it was the bike before that. We built three double-engine bikes in a 3-year period. And the middle bike, the second bike we built, actually set the speed record, 180. And then we developed the third bike, which is the one we ran and set all the world records with and carried on for years with.
So your 2-speed automatic was basically an electric overdrive? Is that what you're...
It wasn't, it was just a planetary gear.
Planetary gear?
Gears to take it out of a ram or overdrive.
Right.
And, but it was mechanically shifted.
Right.
Had a transmission band. When you hit the pedal, lock it in, and went into overdrive.
Right. So that was the big key, and the slipper clutch. I mean, everybody uses slipper clutches now.
Nowadays, every bike is designed basically pretty much after that format that we set up on that thing. Most of them are.
But I mean, even the drag, I mean, the majority of your shifter drag cars uses a slipper clutch, which is the same design.
Exactly.
That you guys...
The fact that we actually, that bike, when you figure it all out, it was actually building a half a dragster. And this done at Dennis Rolane, was in Kenosha here, the R&B Automotive, and he was building dragsters. And so he laid out the whole thing, what we got to do to make this thing really work. And he was really the initial brains behind the whole operation on that stuff. Well, we needed to really work on that bike. And he had stuff like that we copied and just made it for a motorcycle. Especially with a slipper clutch. We just, we showed us how they were, and then we designed and made our own, made our own up. So we didn't invent the slipper clutches, but we utilized them into the motorcycle.
Right. Just like fuel injection. I mean, compared to fuel injection nowadays, which is all electronic, you needed fuel injection to get more fuel.
The biggest thing back in those days, everybody's running carburation, which we also ran. But I experimented with a Wall Phillips fuel injection made in England, but it was a gravity feed system. And when I ran that bike, that had a RPM band that was incredibly hard, fast, but it only lasted for 1,000 RPMs. So the idea with the gravity feed is it's constant. And when we went to the Hilborn injection, it's mechanically fed. As the engine speeds increase, the amount of fuel would increase and the pressure would go up. And then you could have that whole fuel injection system covering the whole RPM range from bottom end all the way to the top end. It was unbelievable what that thing really did for the bike. Because there's no way anybody can really run a carburetor and get a flow enough fuel to feed these motors. There was just no way. So that's the biggest innovation for making horsepower. That's basically where we made a lot of speed on, was actually the fuel injector systems.
And you riding it, what was the trick to riding it?
Hang on. That bike was unbelievable. That was probably one of the most stable bikes out there on that racetrack, really. Mm-hmm. I could have, once I had that thing dialed in, I could have probably done that waving at the throttle and doing it with one hand. But basically the bike was just handled very well. It was really easy to drive. And it was like like that slipper clutch with a 2-speed. It's almost like an automatic transmission. The bike was just almost on its own on there. Just the main of the game was just hang on and let her rip, And we launched that thing at full bore. So when you dropped that clutch on the line, well, you were hanging on to that thing was gone,
Thank you, TC. The inside story of the Hogslayer as we look at this 1937 Brough-Superior SS100. And Ken Rotman, who is working on this bike, is going to tell us all about this Rolls Royce of motorcycles.
I'm working on this 1937 Brough-Superior SS100 with a matchless V-twin motor It's a square motor. The piston's the same diameter as the bore. It's 89.5 by 89.5. This is Brough-Superior, made by George Brough. This is a 1937. This is one of the first years of the matchless motor. Prior to that, they had the Jap motor, the J.A. Prestwich motor. And these bikes were the fastest of their day. Actually, George Brough took the land speed record in 1928 on a Brough-Superior, 130 miles an hour. And also, you know, these things they cost as much as a house in the 30s. They were all hand built, and they were assembled for fit and finish, and then taken apart, and then plated and painted, and then reassembled. And they're kind of hand built for each owner, and each owner got a certificate stating that that motorcycle had done over 100 miles an hour at the factory, and if it didn't do 100 miles an hour, they would take it back into the shop and tune it or whatever they had to do to make it do 100 miles an hour.
All right. Seeing you've done this much research on these, how many did they make altogether? Do you have any?
I think they made 1,000 altogether of all Broughs.
Of all?
Yeah, I think they only made 102 with the matchless motor.
All right, so this motor, and like you're saying, and we
SS100
should explain to the audience, it's a perfect square motor. So the stroke and the diameter are the same, which is sort of a modern, your modern Ducatis and all that also have the short little strokes, but the stroke and are identical. So is this a superior engine to the JAP engine, or what do you think? Or
well, it was definitely more modern technology maybe than the Jap motor. You know, that's what George went with, and he also would use other components. When he built these, they were kind of like the Cracker. He built them out of parts, like it's a Norton gearbox and his Royal Enfield wheels. And he admitted he copied Harley Davidson's front end. It's a Castle fork, but it's a direct copy of Harley JD fork. And so, you know, they were custom built bikes.
So we got the official Jay Leno tour. Jay doesn't allow no TV cameras, no cameras at all in his garage.
Neither do I.
His garage is, but you make an exception for me, thank you. So his garage is probably 1,000 feet long, 3 football fields, probably 200 or 300 feet wide. It's an old factory building, but throughout his whole collection, he's got another 150 motorcycles that are not part of the tour, but they're sitting there, and they're all everything in his museum has a trickle charger on it, because he wants to be able to drive anything in his museum at any time. So he has one room the size of this area here with maybe 12 Brough-Superiors. And I turned to one of the, when we went on tour, there was a crew from a refueling aircraft, you know, Air Force guys or Air Force Reserve guys, and they were on the tour with us. My wife and my brother's wife and this crew and me. So there's one room, he has 12 of these, and I made a remark to one of the guys. I said, Jay probably owns, and I said 10%, but now we're finding out Jay probably owns 1% of the total production of these bikes. I mean, he had these with sidecars. You know, I like I said, I couldn't take any pictures, so I did look at most of them, but it's probably the biggest, because to be able to see one of these is pretty rare. Because the most famous thing, now tell the audience what the most famous thing about these motorcycles is.
Well,
in what movie?
Well, you're going to talk about Sir Lawrence of Arabia.
Right.
T.E. Lawrence, who owned 7 of these and died on one unfortunate
Right.
motorcycle
Did he own
crash.
7 of them?
Yes.
Oh, he didn't.
Yes.
Okay. And in the beginning of the movie, they show him on these, and you see these roads in England. I mean, you wouldn't want to be doing 25 on these roads, and he's clicking along at probably 60, 65.
And then they show his goggles hanging from the tree.
Right.
This show is dedicated to the fond memories of Judy Swartz, John's greatest fan. more information on Ken Rotman, KensBritishClassics.com, KensBritishClassics.com. Visit his website. For T.C. Christensen at Sunset Motors in Kenosha, give him a call at 262-657-5600 and tell him you've seen him on the Team Chicago YouTube clip. If you want to send me a message, it's teamdan45@gmail.com, and look for other great clips right here on YouTube.